Karen called 911 claiming ranch violation, didn't know my uncle's the county sheriff. I never thought someone could weaponize a phone call to hate like that. My name is Luke Dawson. I moved back to my late father's ranch outside Willow Creek after 2 decades away in the Air Force. The land's been in my family since my great-grandfather's homesteading days. Wide open fields, whipping wind through tall grasses, and a quiet that settled into your soul, exactly what I needed after tours in the desert and storms at sea. I wanted solitude. I wanted to rebuild the homestead, raise goats and heirloom crops, and maybe teach my son, Caleb, about roots and responsibility. Willow Creek was 10 families clustered around a dusty highway, no HOA, no paved roads, no neighbor who thought they had a right to my land. Enter Karen Fletcher. She moved in 6 months ago into the old Wilcox place at the top of the ridge. Brand new siding, manicured roses, and a mailbox that looked fancier than all the others put together. Whispered neighbor gossip said she'd been a real estate mogul up north before downsizing. Then came her walking tours. 2 weeks ago, she showed up with pamphlets titled Safety and Aesthetic Guidelines for Country Living, as though we needed another reason to walk in line. She strutted past my fence with that camera, muttering into her mic. You see that? Ladies abandon livestock. Ruined fences. This doesn't look safe. It wasn't until she ramped up and called 911 that things got real. I was down in the barn with Caleb, teaching him grain measurement, when the lights of a sheriff's cruiser and a patrol truck busted through the gate. Sirens off, but lights flashing like flashbulbs. My heart hammered. The deputy stepped out, tall silhouette in moonlight. 911 caller reports unsafe ranching conditions, possible livestock endangerment, he said, flashing his badge. I swallowed hard. That's my ranch. We're fine. He looked past me through the fence. Your neighbor said you've been neglecting fences, letting gates fly open, losing goats. My breath caught. He gave me that look, a glance like he was about to leave, until I spoke. She lied. I said, come see for yourself. It took 5 minutes. He walked the fence line, touched every hog tie, inspected the latches, counted the animals with me, and found nothing out of place. By the time he finished, the storm had arrived. I watched him on the phone, calling it a no-hoax, homeowner dispute. He hung up and said, you ever need anything, bringing it to us first is your best bet, especially with folks who think they're auditors. That's when we heard engines on the gravel drive. 4 patrol cars rolled through the gate neatly. Flashing lights painted the barns in blue and red. Karen stood at the porch edges, her face pale, phone still rattling in one hand. Sir, the lead deputy said, I'd appreciate a word with you about this call and why it escalated. It wasn't a friendly chat. It was more like being cut by a steel glove. The next morning, Karen wasn't just back, she was emboldened. She parked her luxury SUV square across the public ranch access road and posted signs on the nearby split-rail fence. Private HO property trespassers will be fined. I stared at the signs, stunned. There had never been a homeowner association out here, nothing legal. Anyway, the only law that ever mattered in these parts was the county, and our landlines, as per record, hadn't changed since 1962. I pulled the first sign off the wood and dropped it at her feet. Karen stood in wedge heels with her arms crossed, camera streaming to her social media feed. You'll regret that, she hissed, not loud enough for anyone but me. Lady, you've trespassed. You've called in a false police report, and now you're putting up signs on land you don't own. I don't care how many Facebook likes you get. I'm done. She smirked. We'll see about that. Mr. Dawson, I didn't say it, but I knew the we in her sentence meant something more. She wasn't acting alone. I drove into town that afternoon and sat with Sheriff Grady Watkins, my uncle, the same man who taught me how to ride a horse, shoot a rifle, and not flinch when liars stood close. He already knew. She filed a civil complaint with the county this morning. He said, handing me a packet, claimed your livestock wandered onto community land and that you've threatened her on camera. I opened the envelope. Inside were photos of me, some zoomed in through trees, one taken when I was repairing a fence shirtless, making it look more unhinged cowboy than tired rancher. She doesn't own any part of this land. I said, that fence line hasn't moved in 60 years. Grady nodded. We're pulling the plat maps now. But here's what's worse, she's trying to form a fake HOA. Real official-looking documents. Claims it was voted on by a majority of concerned neighbors. I shook my head. That's nonsense. There's maybe 11 families out here. We barely wave at each other, much less vote. She's got signatures at least half a dozen. Grady lowered his voice. Luke, one of them's your neighbor, June Holloway. Another's Pete Carlson, the old Vietnam vet across the canyon. She's roped people in. That hit me in the gut. These weren't just names, they were the same neighbors who brought us pies, waved from tractors, and offered help during winter outages. Something was seriously off. Back home, I found my mailbox stuffed, not with bills or circulars, but with HOA notices printed on thick cardstock. Due to noncompliance, you are hereby assessed a fine of $1 or $200 for violations, including fencing structure, livestock visibility, and unapproved signage. It was laughable if it wasn't terrifying. She had a logo now, a rising sun over a hill plastered across all the mailers. She even listed a board of directors, with her name at the top, President Karen Fletcher. She had a fake seal, a fake HOA, fake votes, but she was playing with real fear. The next morning, Caleb ran into the house, pale as a sheet. Dad, there's a drone over the goat pen. It's been there for 10 minutes. I stepped outside. Sure enough, whining like a mechanical gnat. One of those oversized camera drones was floating right over the south field. It buzzed slowly, like a vulture on assignment. I watched it dip, swoop, and hover toward our farmhouse before zipping back in the direction of Karen's house. That was the last straw. I called Grady. She's spying now, I said, voice trembling, and she's got half the neighbors scared silent. He didn't hesitate. Time to go official. Meet me tomorrow, bring everything. But Karen struck first. That evening, while Caleb and I were at the feed store, she posted on Nextdoor and Facebook that our ranch was a safety hazard, harboring unstable veterans and illegal firearms. She used my military background and the sheriff badge my uncle once gave me as a birthday joke to frame me as a vigilante. Then she did what I feared most. She filed a public injunction to temporarily seize part of my ranch fence for emergency safety inspection. It wasn't legal, but the perception was. Neighbors began whispering. Cars slowed when they passed. One man, normally friendly, turned away at the post office. Karen wasn't just targeting me. She was reshaping the community's mind against me. The next night, someone cut the electric wire to our barn. The goats escaped into the orchard. Caleb cried. I found hoof prints all the way to the fence line leading to her backyard. There, I spotted it, tufts of goat hair clinging to her bushes and bite marks on her wooden latticework. She'd lured them in, or worse. Back inside, I sat down with my coffee and all the evidence she'd piled up against me. Then I noticed something odd in one of the drone photos, details she shouldn't have been able to capture unless she stood on my land. I zoomed in on a reflection in a goat's water trough. There, mirrored perfectly, was the toe of her designer heel on my side of the fence. My heart pounded. She'd trespassed and planted footage, and now I could prove it. By dawn the next day, the first crack in Karen's empire appeared. It started with that water trough photo. I printed it, circled the heel, and overlaid it with a screenshot from her live stream, the same shoes, same day, same earrings. I sent it all to Uncle Grady with a single line trespass and staged evidence. She's in over her head. Grady responded fast. Solid, but we need more. Let's dig. Dig we did. Caleb and I hit the county clerk's office that morning. I requested a plat map, the original land registry, and zoning records. The old clerk, Martha, who'd been here since Nixon, raised an eyebrow when I asked for documents on the HOA. Her lips curled slightly. Another one of Karen's, my stomach dropped. What do you mean? She slid a folder across the counter. She filed articles of association 2 months ago under Willow Ridge Neighborhood Council. But that's not recognized by the county or the state. She paid to register a nonprofit, nothing more. It has zero jurisdiction. And the land she says she represents, Martha snorted. None of it's hers. Not legally. She owns her parcel. That's it. Everything else is cowboy fantasy. Boom. The HOA was a shell, a facade. She was bluffing, counting on fear, silence, and people not knowing the law. Grady met us at the ranch that evening with Deputy Wynn. Together, we laid out the evidence, the drone footage timestamps, her social media slander, the fake violation letters, and the signatures. That's when I said, about those 6 neighbors who signed her HOA petition. I don't think they knew what they were signing. Wynn nodded. We talked to Carlson and Holloway. Both said she cornered them during neighbor visits. Told them it was a community beautification pledge, didn't mention an HOA. So she had forged legal intent. Wynn leaned forward. We're prepping a cease and desist, but we'll need more support to move criminally. You ready to go public? I took a deep breath. Yes. That night, I did something I swore I wouldn't. I stepped into the digital world Karen ruled. I recorded a simple video, just me, Caleb, and the goats behind us. No scripts, no theatrics. I'm Luke Dawson. My family's owned this land since 1894. I'm not part of any HOA. The signs, the fines, the violations, it's all fake. Ms. Karen Fletcher has lied, trespassed, cut my fences, endangered livestock, and filed a false report with the police. This is not how neighbors behave. I'm not backing down, and I invite anyone she's manipulated to speak the truth. I hit upload. By the next morning, the video had over 12,000 views. More importantly, people started talking. Pete Carlson left a comment. She made me sign something she didn't explain. I'm sorry, Luke. I'll fix it. June Holloway posted, I thought it was a block garden club. She threatened to report my son's trailer if I didn't cooperate. Even Janice from across the ravine, who hadn't spoken more than 2 words to me since I moved in, messaged she blocked my delivery truck last week, said it didn't meet aesthetic codes. This is too much. The cracks were now fractures. Karen's illusion of control began to shatter, but Karen wasn't done fighting. She doubled down. Within 24 hours, she papered the town center with flyers, Dawson family harassment, an open letter to Willow Creek. She accused me of digital intimidation, of leveraging police ties for personal gain, and even hinted I had military-grade weapons stored illegally on site. It was vile, unhinged, and now, very clearly, criminal. Uncle Grady filed a restraining order that same day, but the final straw came 2 days later, when Caleb's school called. Someone had reported him for bringing a weapon-shaped item to class. It was his folding ruler from shop class. Karen had crossed into family. I drove straight to Grady's office, trembling. This ends now. He nodded. Then it's time to move. We're serving her officially with witnesses. What Karen didn't know was that while she was prepping another video, we were assembling an informal alliance. Neighbor by neighbor, we gathered testimonials. Carlson signed a statement about being misled. June came forward about being intimidated. Even the Thompsons, normally neutral, showed us her text threats. I printed everything, organized it into folders, and stood beside Grady as he knocked on her door. Karen answered in a silk blouse and a tight smile. Ms. Fletcher, Grady said, you are hereby served with a county order to cease unauthorized HOA activities, trespassing, and harassment. You are also under investigation for defamation, filing false police reports, and violating land boundaries. She blanched. I have video proof, she whispered. So do we. Grady said, yours ends at the truth. Ours begins with it. As we walked back down the hill, I glanced toward the west. Sunset bathed the ranch in gold. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But I also knew the fight wasn't over. Karen had lied to manipulate power. People had followed her, and now they had to unlearn everything she'd planted. That wouldn't happen overnight. I'd always believed justice had a rhythm, slow, steady, quiet. But what happened next was thunder. The day after the cease and desist was served, Karen refused to comply. Instead, she doubled down again. This time, she hosted a community safety rally right at the edge of my property line, with borrowed pop-up tents, a plastic table, and printed violation photos. She pretended to be president of a community that never elected her. And the worst part, people showed up. Not many, maybe a dozen, but they came. Some were curious. Others, I realized, were simply scared of crossing her. I parked my truck just out of range and watched. There she was, smiling and shaking hands, handing out fake bylaws and warning flyers. She had a clipboard and was filming every second for her neighborhood safety watch channel. But something was different now. People were watching her, not as a leader, but with suspicion. And the wind had started to shift. Sheriff Grady called me that afternoon. His tone was clipped. She filed a counter-complaint. Luke, claims you're threatening her campaign for neighborhood improvement. Campaign, I laughed bitterly. This isn't a ballot. It's a land grab. Grady sighed. She's scheduled a press conference tomorrow, right there on the dirt shoulder across from your fence line. Then I'll be ready. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the fence, hammering nails, tightening posts, checking the line. Every board I touched felt heavier than the last, as if soaked in tension and betrayal. At dawn, I stood under the old oak at the front gate and waited. And then the circus rolled in. Karen arrived first, wearing a fitted red blazer and matching lipstick. She carried a microphone and a megaphone. Then came the local news Channel 6, led by reporter Allison Grant, who'd done pieces on everything from rattlesnakes to illegal fireworks. And finally residents, neighbors, curious watchers. I wasn't alone. Behind me, Pete Carlson stepped up. Figured you'd need backup. Then came June. I brought the land deed copies. For the press. Even the Thompsons parked behind the tree line and emerged holding lawn chairs and folded arms. Karen raised the megaphone. Good citizens of Willow Creek today marks the beginning of a safer, stronger neighborhood. I stepped forward and cut her off. Calm but clear. This isn't a neighborhood. It's a ranching district. And what you're doing is illegal. Gasps. Cameras turned. Karen turned beet red. You have no authority here. No, I pointed. Meet Sheriff Grady Watkins, County Sheriff, Land Registrar, and my uncle. We've brought proof of your forged HOA documents, false police reports, illegal surveillance, and harassment. Grady stepped up and addressed the press. We have evidence of fabricated legal documents, coerced signatures, and ongoing community intimidation. Ms. Fletcher is under investigation for multiple counts of fraud and impersonation of official authority. Karen lost it. You're all sheep. You're letting backwoods ranchers keep your neighborhood in chaos. The crowd pulled back. Even the news camera zoomed in. And then came the twist. Caleb, my boy, walked forward. In his hand, the drone, broken in half. I found this in the goat pasture. She used it to spy on us. He dropped it at her feet. Karen gasped. It was the same drone from her video streams, same serial number, same model, same memory card. Grady picked it up and examined it. Well, would you look at that? Karen reached for it, shrieking. That's private property. Grady raised a hand. Not when it was flying over someone else's land and used to stalk a minor. Karen lunged but slipped in the dust. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. That moment broke her spell. The next 48 hours were wildfire. The news story aired that night. Fake HOA president exposed rancher family. Defends land against fraud scheme. Online comments poured in. She needs jail time. This is why people don't trust HOAs. The sheriff is a legend. Respect to the Dawsons for holding the line. And most telling of all, neighbors started removing Karen's signs. One by one. Even people who hadn't supported me in the beginning pulled down HOA violation notices from their fences. Some came over to apologize, others just nodded quietly. By the end of the week, Karen's so-called community command post was gone. She stopped appearing in public. Her SUV sat dusty in the driveway. The HOA email bounced. Her YouTube channel went dark. Grady filed charges, and county prosecutors began proceedings for impersonation. harassment, and filing false reports. She lawyered up, of course, but the damage was done. Her empire had fallen not with a bang, but with the click of camera shutters and the truth set loose like wildfire. I stood at the fence line one last time that season, boots planted in dust worn thin by conflict. Pete, June, the Thompsons, we stood in a quiet circle. Never thought a woman in red heels would almost turn us into HOA property. Pete chuckled. She underestimated ranchers, June added. No, I said, voice steady. She underestimated what happens when the truth shows up with backup. It didn't end with court filings. It didn't even end when Karen packed up and quietly moved out 2 months later under the guise of a spiritual retreat in Sedona. No, the real ending came slowly, like the way a ranch heals after a wildfire. Charred fence posts, scorched brush, and blackened soil don't return to green overnight. But they do come back, and so did we. The first official act after the fall of Karen's fake HOA was one we all agreed on, a community roundtable. No scripts, no agendas, just neighbors, some ashamed, some angry, all exhausted. We held it at the town Grange Hall on a cool October evening. The air smelled like apple cider and hay, and chairs squeaked as folks shuffled in. I sat beside Caleb and watched the room slowly fill. Grady stood at the front not as sheriff, but as a facilitator. I want to start with one truth, he said. What happened here was not about one woman. It was about what fear, pride, and silence allow. He paused. And now, we decide what we allow going forward. People spoke. Pete admitted he signed that petition because Karen scared him into thinking his tool shed was illegal. June apologized for turning away when she saw Karen block my gate. Even Mr. Thompson, gruff and private, cleared his throat and said, I hated the goat smell, but I hated being lied to more. And then, for the first time, I spoke not as a victim, not as a rancher, but as a neighbor. I came back here to raise my son where the sky is wide and your word matters. I almost left because of a woman who didn't believe in either. But what kept me here was this truth. When we stood up together, we made something stronger than her paper rules. I paused, glanced at Caleb. We protected something worth keeping. From that night forward, something shifted. The fences between us, not the wooden ones, but the invisible ones built by suspicion and silence, started to fall. People helped one another again. Pete came by to help me rewire the barn lighting. June offered to teach Caleb how to can peaches. The Thompsons invited us to their anniversary barbecue. No HOA, no fake bylaws, just people learning how to be neighbors the hard way by owning the mess and fixing it together. Karen's trial was scheduled 6 months later. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. She was found guilty of filing false police reports, fabricating legal documents, and community harassment. She was sentenced to probation, mandated therapy, 200 hours of community service, and a public apology aired on local TV. It wasn't the revenge people online had demanded, but it was enough, because Karen lost the one thing she truly cared about: control, and the town gained something it had forgotten: accountability. Spring came, goats gave birth, wildflowers bloomed along the fence lines, and the land forgave, as land often does. Caleb and I added a new gate sign: Dawson Ranch since 1894. Community welcome, trespassers not. One afternoon, I found Caleb sitting on the porch with a school project, a report titled, The Day My Dad Took on a Fake HOA. He looked up. Is it okay if I say you're kind of a cowboy? I laughed. Only if you add that I had help. As the sun dipped behind the western hills, I thought back on everything we'd been through. The fake fines, the false charges, the online mob, the yelling, the fear, the fences. But I also remembered the voices that rose in defense, the neighbors who found courage. And the day we turned community from a word into a choice, we didn't just stop Karen. We exposed a lie. And we proved that justice isn't loud, but it is patient. And when it arrives, it doesn't come alone. Too often, injustice hides behind bureaucracy, titles, or fear. Sometimes it takes one voice to call it out. Other times, it takes many. What happened on our ranch wasn't just about goats and gates. It was about standing up when the system fails and building something stronger in its place. So if you've ever been silenced, doubted, or pushed by someone abusing their authority, speak up. If you've watched wrongdoing from a safe distance, step in. And if you believe in community, truth, and second chances, build it with your neighbors, not against them. Because justice isn't just the sheriff's job, it's all of ours. What do you think was Karen's downfall? Satisfying justice? Share your thoughts on where the line between community protection and personal overreach lies.